Chapter 1. Never Return from the Hike. This story fires up the imagination. The deeper you dive into the circumstances, the facts, the testimonies, and the documents describing the tragedy of the hiking group led by Igor Dyatlov in February 1959, the sharper the feeling that unfolds before you is not reality, but a story meticulously crafted by someone, a perfectly detailed, gripping detective story. Every fact is a riddle, every detail a dead end. The story is woven with chilling intrigue and a dreadful mystery. It teases and bewilders with logical traps. The more you explore the twists of events and the entanglement of facts, studies, and investigations of the tragedy, the further you drift from reality. Eventually, truth blurs into fiction, and fiction blends into calculated fantasy. But I must stay cold-blooded. We are dealing with a puzzle that everyone who hears about it becomes obsessed with solving. I am no exception. I've been trying to solve it for 10 years now. It won't let me go, and I feel compelled to tell the tragic story of 1959. As I understand it, I emphasize, as I understand it, because everyone who knows this story sees it their own, very different way. Everyone interprets the facts and builds conclusions about what happened that night, from February 1st to 2nd, 1959, with their own unique perspective, and their theories stretch as far as the universe itself. So, here's what we know. On January 23rd, 1959, a group of hikers from Sverdlovsk set off for an expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. There were 10 of them at the start. 6 students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Yuri Doroshenko, and Yuri Yudin. 3 graduates of the same institute, Rustem Slobodin, Georgy Krivonishenko, and Nikolai Thibault Brignol, plus Semyon Zolotaryov, an instructor from a tourist base. The group was led by 5th-year radio engineering student Igor Dyatlov. They traveled by train to the town of Serov, then further by train to Ivdel, by bus to the village of Vijay, and finally by truck to a logging outpost known as the 41st District. From there, they strapped on their skis and, accompanied by a sled carrying their backpacks, made their way to the abandoned settlement of 2nd Northern. At this point, one of the participants, Yuri Yudin, fell ill and left the group. The rest continued along the route and vanished. They were supposed to return to Sverdlovsk by February 15th. When they didn't, their friends and families raised the alarm, and search operations began. On February 26th, the Dyatlov group's tent was found, empty. One side of the tent, the one facing the slope, had large slashes in it. Later examinations confirmed the tent had been cut from the inside. On the tent and in the snow nearby, a flashlight, traces of urine. Footprints led away from the tent. The footprints' spacing suggested that the hikers had run, not walked. Some tracks were left by people without shoes. On February the 27th, 2 bodies were discovered, Krivonishenko and Doroshenko, beneath a cedar tree about a mile from the tent. They were strangely dressed, or rather undressed, down to their underwear. Nearby was a dead campfire, their legs and arms showing burns. That same day, they found the bodies of Dyatlov and Kolmogorova. Zinaida's body lay about 600 meters uphill from the cedar. Igor's about 300 meters, half reclining, clutching a birch tree. Both lay with their heads pointed toward the tent. 16 hours later, search dogs picked up a scent under the snow, 180 meters higher than Dyatlov's body. It was Rustem Slobodin. The search for the others yielded nothing until early May, when the snow began to melt. Only then, 70 meters from the cedar, were the last four found. First, a raised platform was discovered, a structure made from branches with clothing neatly placed in the corners. The bodies lay a bit away from it, partially dressed. The autopsy revealed horrifying injuries incompatible with life. This was not the first or only mass death of hikers in Sverdlovsk Oblast, nor in the country. People had died, and sadly, would continue to die in the mountains. But no other known tragedy compares to the death of Dyatlov's group in its eerie impact. It remains a unique case, one that has triggered an avalanche of questions due to the infernal complexity of the events that unfolded on the slope of Mount Kholat Shachel. Following the words of journalist Gennady Grigoriev, who visited the site in 1959 as part of a search team, I had never met these guys and girls before, but I grew to love them. I feel so sorry for them. So incredibly sorry. The criminal case on the Dyatlov group's death was closed in May 1959, but it still draws intense interest, even 60 years later, and only questions remain. The most mysterious ones are these. What made the hikers flee the tent in such panic? Their actions defy all logic. Veteran hiker Vadim Brusnitsin recalled, "We never abandoned our tents no matter what. Once, a thunderstorm caught us at 5,000 meters. It was terrifying. Thunder roared, lightning flashed everywhere. We quickly set up our tent and took shelter inside. No one left the tent. No one ran. Everything that happened after the group fled the tent, the cold, the deaths, can somehow be pieced together. But the cause of the initial panic remains unexplained. What terrifying event unfolded in that tent on the night of February 1st, 1959, in the northern Urals? Why would healthy, rational young people, experienced hikers who had faced harsh conditions before, suddenly slash open their own tent and run into the freezing wilderness barely dressed? If they cut the tent from the inside, they must have realized they would not be returning to it. They acted consciously, yet they fled. Why? Why, after successfully lighting a fire, did they abandon it? Why did Dyatlov and Kolmogorova attempt to crawl back uphill toward the tent? What or who struck Slobodin with such force that it fractured his skull? Why were Dubinina, Zolotaryov, Thibaut Brignol, and Kolevatov found separately from the others? Why did the tent remain standing, untouched, after a month on a slope battered by savage winds? Why were the injuries so horrifying? 3 out of 9 had suffered fatal trauma. Thibaut Brignol's skull was smashed. Zolotaryov had broken ribs. Dubinina's ribs were also fractured. It's worth noting, Zolotaryov had 2 ribs broken at the junction with the sternum, a spot notoriously difficult to fracture without immense force. According to experienced doctors, young people's ribs are very elastic. They bend before they break. The trauma could not have come from a fist or a club. Forensic experts concluded it must have been a blow against a wide, solid surface. What surface? That's yet another mystery. And these are only the main questions. There are dozens more, smaller, but no less significant. Yet all the answers are vague, indefinite, and ultimately unconvincing.